Afternoon, everybody. This is Lloyd Morris with AVS Medical. Thank you for joining us today as we go through meaningful use reporting. Before we begin, if you still have your GoToWebinar control panel up on the upper right-hand side of your screen, you can go ahead and minimize that now by pressing the little red arrow right here, and that will minimize the control panel so that you can see the bulk of the screen. Your phone lines are muted during my presentation, but at the end I can unmute your phone lines one at a time, or if you'd like to type a question in, you can do that at the bottom of your control panel. It should say type a question here, click send, and then I can answer that question. So before we begin, I want to go through our disclaimer. It is the responsibility of the provider and the practice to modify their workflow to capture all of the required information that will be needed to ensure that you meet meaningful use. The provider and the practice is responsible for running all of the reports that we're going to talk about today, and ultimately it's the responsibility of the provider to submit this data for attestation and for the accuracy of the data. So today's focus is to talk about the two reports in your EMR that are needed to attest ultimately for meeting meaningful use. And there are two reports that you'll need to run. The first one is called the Performance Metrics Report, and the second one is called the Clinical Quality Measures Report, or CQM. And we're going to talk about both of those today in detail. So first off, running of the reports. Why do we need to do this? What's the goal here? So the reports are going to generate and provide the values that you'll need when you do your submission to CMS for attestation. The other benefit or goal of running the reports is to identify areas in the meaningful use process where you may be not meeting the right percentage. We'll talk about this in more detail as we go through here today, but they're really there for monitoring your progress and identifying areas of concern that you need to address. You should run them routinely. It won't hurt to run them as often as you like. If you've never run them before, the first time you run them your numbers may be low, and that's okay, but what you want to look for is that the second time that you run them after a day or two of taking corrective action, that the numbers are going up. So let's talk first about the Performance Metrics Report. And this report is used to report on all of the objectives, both core and menu, that require an actual measure or an actual set of numerator and denominator that need to be reported to CMS. This report can be run from any computer that's on your network, and the typical installation path of where you'll find this report, and I'll show you this in just a second, but you see the path right there. So on any workstation, if you open up Windows Explorer and you go to C:\Program Files x86 McKesson Practice Partner, in the Practice Partner folder is a report called pmsi.reports.performancemetrics, and if you double click that, that report will open up. You can also create a shortcut for that report and put it out on your desktop to make it easier to run. And then I'm going to show you this in a minute, but when you double click that icon, you'll be prompted to enter a username and password, and that username and password is the same one that you put in to get into your EMR. So more about that in just a second. So here's some graphics of how to find this report, and this is actually a montage here of a couple different photos on the left, and this is cut off a little bit, but this is my C:\Program Files x86. And so now here you see the McKesson folder, and then inside of that is a Practice Partner folder. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're running Practice Partner, Medisoft, or Lytec, it's always going to say Practice Partner here. But when you click that folder on the right, you'll see a list of files, and you'll want to scroll down until you see pmsi.reports.performancemetrics. Now you can double click that, and that will launch the report, or if you right click it with your right mouse button, you'll have the option to send a shortcut out to the desktop. And that's what this little picture is right here. So I've sent a shortcut out to my desktop, and it says pmsi.reports shortcut. So this is what it should look like on your computer desktop once you've done that. And again, that can be done at any workstation. I'm going to do this live in just a second, so here's a picture of it. But you do want to run this by provider. And excuse me, if you look a little bit further down here at the picture, you'll notice that it says specific provider here, and you've got to drop down. Even if there's only one provider in your practice, you'll still have to hit that drop down and select your name off the list. You'll notice that there's a report from date and a report to date. These fields will fill in automatically. On the report to side, it'll put in today's date. This is an old photograph. It's got last year's date on it, but it'll put in today's date, and then it'll automatically back calculate 90 days. Now this is a good point to mention. If you have already attested for meaningful use in 2011 or in 2012, you will report for the entire 12-month period this year. So if you've attested in the past, your reporting period is going to be January 1st of 2013 through December 31st of 2013. So if it'll put in today's date here, but you're going to want to hit the drop down and change it back to the January 1st of this year to get the correct set of data. Down below, these are all of the objectives, both core and menu, but these are the ones that require an actual value, an actual set of numbers that need to be reported as CMS. So if you look through this list, or when you look through the list on your computer, you may notice that there are some that are missing. And the reason they're missing is because the ones that are missing do not require a number. They just require you to attest yes or no to those. So these are the ones that actually require a metric. And I'll show you in a few minutes when we run this live which ones you should probably check off. Okay, so here we see an actual copy down here at the bottom. Oops, I'm sorry. Down here at the bottom of this slide, we see an actual copy, and I'm going to do this live in just a second. But this is what the EHR Performance Metrics report would look like once it's been run. It's going to give the date that it was done. It's going to give the reporting period here that you chose and the provider for whom you chose to run the report for. Down below here, it's going to give each of the objectives that you chose to run the report for. So here, the first one, we see record demographics. And to the right of that, we see the threshold. So this is the minimum acceptable threshold that you need to successfully attest. So in the case of demographics, at least 50% of the patients that you saw had to have their demographics recorded in the proper fashion. To the right, it tells us here's our, in this case, the denominator's on top. So this is the number of patients that were seen was 9. This is my demo database, so it's not a lot of data in here. But we saw 9, and of those 9, we only met the performance goal for one of them. So 1 out of 9, or here's my percentage, 11%. If this were real data and I was running this for one of our practices, or you were running it for your practice, then you're going to want to look at this area and address the concern about patient demographics not being met. So more about that in just a sec. Okay, so that's the performance metrics report. Now we're going to talk briefly about the clinical quality measures, or CQM report. And if you'll remember from some of our earlier webinars, we talked about core objective number 11, which requires you to report on a set of 6 clinical quality measures to CMS. So this report, the CQM report, addresses just this one core objective. So we run this report just to get the values for this objective. This report is different from the one we talked about a moment ago in that it can only be run from your server. So when it's time to run this, you're going to have to go over to your server and run it from the server. And when you run this report, you will choose 3 core or alternate core CQMs and 3 non-core CQMs. And I've put an asterisk on this to call that out, because when you go to do the attestation, it will only let you report on 3 core/non-core and 3, excuse me, let me restate that. It will only allow you to submit data for 3 core/alternate core, and then you have to submit data on 3 non-core. So the point I'm trying to make is you can't do 4 and 2 or 1 and 5. It's got to be 3 of each. So this report is also run by the provider, and when you run the report, you want to make sure that the date range on the report matches the date range of your reporting period. And we're going to do this live in a second, so I'll show it to you. I did also call out here at the bottom that a quote from CMS where they say reporting zeros is acceptable for your CQMs if that is what has been calculated by your certified EHR technology. So the point here is that there are no minimum values for these. You want to make sure that you're recording the data correctly, but we don't need to worry about what the percentages are. And when you get this slide set, there'll be a link to a great site from CMS that has more information on CQMs. So let's keep going here. This is what it'll look like on your server desktop. It'll be this round blue ball with that's supposed to be a P in there in white, and it'll say clinical quality measures, or it may say CQM, but you should see this on your server and only on your server. If yours doesn't look like this, it may mean that you have an older version of the software. So if yours doesn't look like this, we want to get connected to your server and we'll update that report for you. And then when you double click this icon, this is what we'll launch over here. This is what the actual CQM reporting utility looks like. I'll talk more about that in just a second. So when you run that, this is an image of what the report will look like. So it'll have your reporting period up here. It'll have the date that you printed it, the provider for whom you ran it, and then this report is usually, depending on how many CQMs you chose, this can be up to 7, 8, 9, 10 pages long, and it'll have each of the objectives that you selected. In this case, we see hypertension, blood pressure management, and by the way, you'll notice here it says core measure, and then it gives you here, it tells you a little bit about how this data is calculated. So this one happens to be percentage of patient visits, patients 18 or older with a diagnosis of hypertension who have been seen for at least 2 office visits and had their blood pressure recorded. Now, by the way, this little statement right here, seen for at least 2 office visits, this is why very often your CQM report is low, particularly if you're doing your 90-day attestation and not the year-long attestation, because a lot of times you don't see patients twice during a 90-day period. So a little different if it's a 12-year recording period, but for the 90-day, that's why oftentimes those are set very low. So before we get to questions, I'll open up the phone lines and answer your questions in just a second. Let me jump out of my slideshow. Let's go out to my computer desktop here. So this is just on my laptop. And then right here in the middle of my screen, you can see this is my performance metrics report, and above it is the clinical quality measures report. So I'm going to go ahead and double click the performance metrics report first. Remember, this is the one that can be run from any workstation. So first thing is you're prompted to log in with your regular username and password. Okay. So as soon as you put that in, the performance metrics report pops up. Again, you want to make sure specific provider is selected, and you want to hit the drop down. Now I'm logged in here as Abel Cobb, so I'll just double click his name, my provider credentials, ABC. And again, here's my report from and my report to dates. So it's got today's date here, and then it back calculates automatically 90 days. That's convenient if you're just doing a 90-day reporting period, but if you're reporting for the entire year, you're going to want to hit the drop down and then navigate back to the beginning of the year to get your data set. I'm going to leave it set for here. Actually, to make this run a little quicker, I'm going to just put in a much shorter range. And by the way, you can type the date in there if you want, so I just put in September. So down here are all of our objectives. Again, these are the ones that require actual numbers. The way that I typically do this is I hit check all. Now, it's depending on which ones you're doing, you probably will not check all of these. A lot of people do not do these summary of care. These two actually are the same. A lot of people are not doing clinical lab tests. A lot of people take an exclusion to providing patients with an electronic copy of their health record. Providing patients with timely access is also an optional one, and the reminders is also an optional one. So this is the one that most people do, this data set right there. Okay, so the way you run the report now is just simply to click report one time, and we'll give it a few seconds here, and then that will pop up. So here's our report. So it comes up, and again, just like we saw before, the date that it was run, the date range, who the provider is, and then here's all of our objectives. And again, I see the objective name, I see the threshold, I see my data over here, and then these are areas that I need to focus on in my workflow to make sure that I'm going to be able to meet meaningful use at the end of the year. So in the upper left-hand corner, you've got a little printer icon right there. If you click print, you can print that out. To the left of that is a little floppy disk icon. We don't see floppy disks anymore, but if we click that, it'll give us the ability to come in here, give this a name. I'll just call it PMSI. And the type initially is a crystal report. You want to hit the drop down right there and change it to Adobe Acrobat. So give it whatever name you want. You know, if you want to put the provider's name in there to make it easier to see, you can do that. Or just call it whatever you want and click Save. And then that'll save a copy wherever you choose to save it. Okay, so that's the performance metrics report. Let's close out of there. Let's close out of here. And now let me show you the clinical quality measures report next. Okay, so that was the performance metrics report. Let's go ahead now and run the clinical quality measures report. So that's the one right above it, a little blue circle. You can double click that. I'm going to just right click it and hit open. And it may take a moment or two to open up on your computer. We'll just give it a few seconds here. Okay. So by the way, the CQM report uses the Microsoft Access Runtime database. So that stuff in the background is Microsoft Access. That's what that is. So again, put in your EHR credentials. Click OK. Now on my computer, this is just the way mine is. Over here on the left, you shouldn't see this access stuff over here. You're just going to see this box right here. So here is the clinical quality reporting tool. And by the way, if you want to, you can kind of move this, and then you can drag the window down to make it a little bit bigger, easier to see. Or you can hit the expand window here and fill up your entire screen, however you prefer to do it. Okay, so at the top here, these are all of the measures. And by the way, before I talk about those, let me point out one very important detail. In the very bottom right-hand corner, down here where it says the version, what you want to look for on yours is that it should say CQM Update 3. This is the most current one, and this is the one that has the, they just released several new CQMs this year dealing really with asthma. So, excuse me. So we see all of the CQMs up here, and you're going to pick the ones that you want to run off the list, and you can just scroll through this list and choose the ones that you want to report on. So step one is to choose your CQMs up here, and then step two is to come down to the extract field here and put in your date range. Again, this date range wants to match your meaningful use reporting period. Unlike the performance metrics report, the dates in these two boxes are what's called sticky, meaning once you set them, they stick. So once you put in, if you put in a set of dates today, if you open this up tomorrow or next week, those same two dates will be in there. So you need to come in here and manually change those dates. Just like the other one, you can come in and you can type in the date if you want to, or you notice as soon as you get in that field, a little calendar icon comes up, and then you can click and select which one you want. I'm just going to make this run fairly quickly, I'm going to make it a narrow date range here. So I'm just going to do it for basically 1 month. So you set your two dates here in the extract field, and then before you do anything else, you want to come down to the summarize field, and you want to make sure the dates match. So I'm going to change that to 9/2. So now in these two boxes, I've got the date ranges matching, and then the last thing you want to do before you actually extract the data is come down to this last section where it says report. And it will always do this. I don't know why it does it, but it does. It will always default to all providers combined. You don't want to do that. You want to come over here to by provider. You want to put a check in there, and then you want to come over to the providers box right here. Click that and choose your name or the provider's name off of the list of all of the providers that are in the system. Okay, so make sure it says by provider, hit the providers button, and then do one provider selected. Okay, so we want to make sure that we've got our providers set correctly, and once all of this is done, once we've got our CQM selected, we've got our two date ranges matching, we've got our provider chosen, we want to come up to the extract data button right here. Now, well, I'm being prompted here to reuse extracted data that I have run before. The answer here is no, generally because it doesn't, for some of the data fields, the data doesn't change, even though you may have updated them or put more data in. So here, just click no. And then what happens is you get this view window up here, and you'll notice that this data just starts to hopefully go through very rapidly. It's analyzing all of the data. And then when it's done, at the very top, you'll get this message that the summarize is finished. Now, I don't have any data in my system, and it shows a very narrow date range, so that ran fairly quickly. But on real systems where I've seen people do this, I've seen it take 10 to 15 minutes to run. So it can take a while for that to run. Don't be concerned if that happens. But once you get the summarize finished, click close. And then once that's done, you can come down here to there's two things you can do here. You can export it or you can preview it. I generally hit preview first. And then what that does is it actually will put the report up on the screen. So here it is, and I'm going to hit the expand button right there to make it go full screen. And I'll collapse this. Again, you shouldn't see that, but here it is. So here's our CQM report. Here's the date range, the provider, and then here's all of the CQMs that I chose. My numerator, my denominator, and most, if not all of these measures, you'll see something a little bit different, an exclusion. That will almost always be 0. I've never seen it not be 0, so don't be concerned about that one. But then down below it is your measure score. That'll be your percentage. Again, I'm using a demo database, so I don't have any data in here. So mine should say all zeros. At this point, you can come in. If you click the print preview, it will give you the ability to preview it and then print it. Or if you want to save it, which is what a lot of people will do, is they'll click export, choose PDF, and when the PDF file save as window comes up, again, remember you're doing this on the server, so what a lot of folks will do is they will browse to their network, and I don't have one on here, but they'll find their P drive, and that P drive can be seen from any workstation. So and usually there is an AVS installs folder or an AVS installs folder on that P drive. I would suggest that you give that a name, maybe the provider's name, and save it. Again, you don't see it here on mine because I don't have one, but you would see P. If you selected that, you'd see AVS installs there, and then hit save. Now, what the purpose of that is you ran it on your server. You or for whoever you're running it for can open it up from your workstation later. So then you would just save that. I'm going to hit cancel, so I don't really want to save it. So that is the CQM report. That's what that looks like, and those are the two reports that we need to run. Again, we want to run these routinely. We're running these during the meaningful use process. We're running these to measure, or you're running these to measure your performance, to identify areas of shortfall, to identify areas where you're doing a good job, where you need to maybe concentrate, and then ultimately you'll run them one last time at the end of your attestation period to be able to submit the data to Medicare or Medicaid. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to go ahead now and open up the phone lines for everybody.